Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is an absolutely intriguing story that ties together Tony Blair, John Reid, Martin McGuiness and the IRA, where John Reid, the then Irish Northern Ireland Secretary, told them in a meeting he'd turn a blind eye to IRA murders. Now this story's absolutely jaw-dropping, and it centres around John Reid, who's now in the Lords, House of Lords. He's the ex-Celtic Chairman, who was, oddly enough, hated and despised by a lot of the Celtic fans. And he also, the timing of HMRC's test case against Rangers Football Club kind of came towards the end of his time as an MP, and many suggest that he had somehow instigated that test case. What happened was loads of football clubs in the UK using a tax scheme, and HMRC decided to take Rangers to task when there was loads of other big clubs, lots down south, using the exact same process. And it led to Rangers administration, and no other club was ever pursued after that. So John Reid's got a bit of a strange past, and because of his time as the Northern Ireland Secretary and Home Secretary, Celtic supporters, a lot of them didn't take to him. But it turns out he actually helped one of the groups that quite a lot, not every Celtic supporter, because there's a lot who hate that sort of stuff, but a lot of the songs you see in banners at Celtic Park celebrate the Irish Republican Army. And it looks like John Reid was actually very good for them in some aspects when we're looking for peace in Northern Ireland. And this story is just bonkers. I've seen it, and I've done this a few times. I've seen a story and thought, that can't be right. But I'll put a link to the story in the comments below. It was actually an exclusive by the Belfast Times. And their headline is exclusive: Blair's cabinet turned a blind eye to IRA murders. Explicit admission conflicts with government figures who previously denied they knew about any IRA activity, but effectively they ignored it. And it says Tony Blair's government admitted to Sinn Féin that it deliberately turned a blind eye to IRA criminality up to and including murders. Declassified files have been revealed. Secretary of State John Reid explicitly made that statement to Gerry Adams and Martin McGuiness, despite repeated denials from other figures in Blair's government that it knowingly tolerated serious criminality. Files opened at the National Archives in Kew is a record of a meeting in Hillsborough Castle on October the 9th, 2001. Reid met with Adams McGuiness and Adams' side aide Richard Macaulay for dinner. In the wake of the September 11 terror attacks in America, the IRA was under intense pressure to finally begin decommissioning more than 3 years after the Good Friday Agreement. For those who don't know, the Good Friday Agreement was basically the terms set up to give us peace in Northern Ireland, and obviously 3 years later, part of that was that both sides would decommission arms, and 3 years later, IRA hadn't bothered. So they were trying to get that process back on track. Adams had told the government that this would happen, but almost a month after the mass murders in the USA, nothing had happened. During the 4-hour meeting, the Secretary of State, that would be John Reid, said that his interpretation of Sinn Féin's attempts to amend the draft government statement to be issued after decommissioning was that they wanted to get away from the idea of a process of decommissioning. That would mean decommissioning would be effectively just symbolic, a single act to destroy some weaponry rather than the complete disarmament of the IRA. There had been an expectation that a first act of decommissioning would be followed up by a second and third. However, many would be necessary to destroy the IRA's enormous arsenal at the time. The Secretary of State said that the British and Irish governments and Sinn Féin had effectively been colluding to cover up the IRA's responsibility for most serious crimes. He told them that the IRA could not expect Her Majesty's government and the UUP to say this publicly, but privately we could seek to shift the focus away from decommissioning. The quid pro quo was that other paramilitary activities, smuggling, beatings, robberies and murders, would come under closer scrutiny. We had turned a blind eye to these activities in belief that the IRA was involved in the process of transition. Feigning aspiration, Adams said Now, this is bonkers, right? Because you think all the claims it just went the other way: robbery, murder, smuggling, beatings, blah blah blah. But Adams said there was no evidence that the IRA had been involved in any smuggling. So basically just saying, the rest's true, we've done all that other stuff, but oh no, we don't do smuggling, right? We need to get real about what's happening in Northern Ireland. We were involved in a conflict resolution process or not. The Secretary of State said he knew he was delivering a message Adams did not want to hear, but was trying to be open and honest. If the IRA was not involved in any of the issues the government claimed, then it should have had nothing to fear from intensified efforts to prevent murders, beatings, robberies and other criminality. However, Adams, the memo said, pushed back ferociously, telling Reid that the government was pursuing the wrong strategy and a quid pro quo approach would not work. He said we should get the process working and ensure it moved forward without preconditions or obstacles. If this worked and the political process worked effectively, then, this is Adams telling him, that the IRA would just simply go away. McGuiness said that the Secretary of State had scared them. It was clear from what he said that Sinn Féin would rather face further problems down the road. Her Majesty's government needed to decide whether Sinn Féin leadership were committed to a peaceful and democratic way forward, and if so, then nothing should threaten their participation in the process. However, a fortnight later, the IRA announced that it had decommissioned its first tranche of material. 2 months earlier, Reid had privately told the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, that it was increasingly difficult to justify devolution with Sinn Féin while it was linked to an active private army which had undiminished criminal activity. An 8-page memo to the Prime Minister dated August 2801, the Secretary of State said, perhaps time to reassess our strategy more generally. Devolution with Sinn Féin still linked to an active private army is becoming even harder to sustain. A ceasefire against the security forces is indeed welcome, but a top-line ceasefire which is accompanied underneath by an undiminished level of military preparations and criminal activity is more and more difficult to overlook. We need to work up a plan B and, if possible, try to work Bertie Ahern round to our viewpoint. So now what he's suggesting is Bertie Ahern was the Irish Prime Minister at the time. So he's basically saying his opinions were the same as IRA's, which is a big shout as well. It will not be easy, but appeasement is not a tangible strategy indefinitely. So he's basically owning up to the fact that they're appeasing the IRA Sinn Féin just now. He said the arrests of IRA members in Colombia, where they were training FARC members in terrorist skills, apparently in exchange for money garnered from the drugs trade, made it more difficult to sell even decommissioning to the Unionists, because it would look like weapons were being destroyed one day and new ones brought in from elsewhere. He said, Colombia has become a very public tip of the iceberg, which makes it difficult to avoid facing up to the submerged element of criminal activity and military preparation. He added that if the IRA didn't quickly demonstrate that it was prepared more exclusively to support democratic means, we cannot for much longer go on hiding the truth about what they are really getting up to, which is killing, robbing, targeting, developing new weapons and racketeering. So this is him basically admitting that they're hiding the truth as well from everybody out with these discussions. And then it goes on and on. But the other stuff, just Bertie Ahern. Speaking 4 years ago, Ahern recalled, frankly, there's a sense that you had to be turning a blind eye to some IRA criminality in the past. Yeah, I think there had been over the period 98 onwards, and a number of cases where it had been reported that was a belief that the provisional IRA were involved. So it's just backing up what Ahern said back in 2021. And this is quite incredible. That this piece of paper's finally found the light of day. And it just shows you what goes on behind the scenes that many of us don't know. And we're told, quite frankly, at the time when any allegations are made, oh no, that's not happening, that's not happening, that's not happening. And although this is quite a big, serious thing with IRA and what was allowed to go on, known to the British government, there'll be loads of things like this, where the people in the UK are told, no, we're not doing that. Well, yeah, And you're quite evidently doing it. And these people should be ashamed of themselves. Now, these things might have been necessary at that time to try and move the whole thing along. I don't know. I'm not going to argue that either way. It's stinking and it's not nice, but that might be, part of what had to happen at the time. I don't know. But the complete denial and lies told to the British public, to a guy who's now sitting in the House of Lords and a Prime Minister at the time that still walks the streets after loads of things like him, that he's lied to the British public, particularly the one that does my nut in the most, was sending young British soldiers to die in a war that shouldn't have happened. And these people, I don't know how they sleep at night. So if you enjoyed the video, you want other people to see the video, do 3 things please. Click the thumbs up, put some comments below and hit the share button. Any of those 3 things and all of those 3 things together will help put the video in more people's timelines. And if you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications bell for the channel. But most importantly of all, unless you're the type of person that as a politician and as a cabinet minister and a government at the time that tell the good people of the United Kingdom total lies, then know you. But
everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.